Hey guys, welcome back to Cast with Friends. It's me, Jose Alvarado, 23, with my friend Niko Pal. Niko, say your name and age.
My name is Niko Pal, and I am 28, the later end of the 20-somethings.
Yeah, and today we're going to be talking about some topics about music, I guess, and some other things, maybe some experiences and stories. And yeah, that's about it. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Appreciate it. So, Nico, when did you start learning music? When did that come about?
So, I guess my first experience with music was a terrible piano teacher, probably when I was about 6 or 7. Her name was like Zeta or Zeta or something with a Z. It was a really unique name, but it wasn't really a vibe that I connected with. And so I really didn't find my vibe with music until I was in middle school. And it started with singing, actually. And the way that it all started was my middle school had this big, internal school fair, and all of the different classrooms were converted into different themes, and one of the rooms was converted into a karaoke room. And I have a distinct memory of being dragged down the hallway by these three teenage girls and being taken into the karaoke room where I fell in love with some classic songs like Under the Boardwalk and Rockin' Robin, and that kind of started this interest in singing for me. But it wasn't until high school, when I was in choir around junior year, that I started to understand music differently and wanting to play piano. And piano was sort of the gateway for me to a lot of different understandings of music.
That's really awesome. That's really cool to hear the journey. Honestly, for me, it was really different because growing up, I I had some cultural divide in the types of music I listened to, right? Because I grew up with my parents being both Mexican, so they listened to a lot of their music, which was Spanish music and a cultural music. And then once I got onto that bus to school, it was an entire different music. I would listen to American radio, and that was such a difference for me because at home it would be a different set of sound than when I would outside of my house. So when I would grow up, uh, I used to not like my parents' music because it wasn't the same music that I would hear outside of that house. It was such a weird kind of upbringing because I didn't know what to like. Because at some point I had to realize that I had to like my own type of music, and that was just it was a weird growing up. But at what point did you decide you liked your own music and you didn't like what was brought onto you? Like when your parents brought you into their car and you were driving down the road and they turned on their radio station and you didn't, what was the point where you were like, you know what, I don't like this, I'm going to listen to my own music? What was that for you?
Well, okay, so my taste in music growing up was probably pretty terrible. But the one thing I will say is that growing up, I
Mm.
absolutely hated Prince.
Wow,
And so
really?
Prince being somebody that generally is perceived as one of the greatest musicians alive, because he plays so many different instruments, and he really found his sound and managed to create a persona around his sound. And that's something I recognize as an adult, but growing up, it was just the music that my mom was constantly playing. And so for me, Prince was always something that I felt like I could never relate to. Strangely enough, the Beatles is also something that I never felt like I could relate to. But I would say that growing up, like, a lot of the music that drew me in was honestly like the Pokemon soundtrack and the Digimon soundtrack were heavily listened to, but that was like what, first or second grade for me. But at the same time, a lot of the music that I enjoyed, I was exposed to from both my dad and my mom, like the Beastie Boys and Africa Bambaataa, and a lot of this like old school, more like techno 80s disco, like Dancing Queen, It's Raining Men, like this just like different vibe of music compared to what we have nowadays in music.
That's really interesting. I always find it fascinating how much music has changed within the last maybe 30 years. I mean, it's 2020 now, but like 1990, they didn't have a laptop and all these types of different synths. Like the process was completely different, right? They would get on a piano, figure out a melody, the chords, and the progression. But now, I mean, like you could have a 16-year-old kid with a laptop going on Fruity Loops and just creating an entire beat. And next thing you know, you can be Take Keith picked up by Drake, and you're 19 in your college dorm room, and now you have a deal with the next best thing. You know what I mean? I think it's such a crazy progression. What do you think has been the biggest component of that progression? Like what has been the biggest reason of like this musical jump in terms of access and availability and just the yeah, what do you think?
So that's a really complicated question to answer, but I think the best way to look at it would simply be put in technology, right? And so I think one of the biggest things that help music propagate itself would be the advent of smartphones as we know it, which really was just a pretty recent development as of like 2010-ish, I want to say, was when the first iPhone started coming into more prominence. And so it's really only been the last 10 years that we've seen music as a like asset be propagated in the way that it was before. Like no longer are musicians actually reaching platinum record sales because they're not selling albums the same way that they used to in times past. And what changed for a lot of people in that way was the music technology that made creating music possible. At least like a lot of the sophisticated things that we see nowadays is a lot more accessible, but still it's expensive. But like comparing the cost of, say, like Omnisphere 2 at $750 versus like some of Moog's top of the end line synthesizers at like $3 to $4 grand, and you can get multiple of these different virtual software instruments that allow you to do close to the same thing as these hardware, analog, sometimes digital instruments would have let you do at the same in the times past. And it's just become a cheaper level of entry, but still it's really complicated. It's really expensive.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely insane how technology has allowed honestly anyone with a rhythm to be able to create music, and it's so accessible. And I think that's beautiful, honestly, because for a while there was such a separation. I think there was such a stigma, like if you were a band geek, if you were a band kid, if you were you know what I mean, like there was such a stigma on these people who were very involved in music. And now that like it's accessible to everyone, I think there's been a change in shift in culture that has shifted towards the musician and the actor and the artist, basically. And I think that's really cool. But how has your mid-20s affected your music? Like how's your music changed throughout your life? Like I know you don't listen to the same music you did when you were 10 or 15 years old. So how would your shift in music be described?
So for me, I think the most relevant age to talk about would be starting around like the high school age, because that's when I feel like most people start to have more cognizance and decision making in terms of the music that they listen to or just the decisions they make in general. But um, I would say that initially I was a lot more open-minded about what the future had in store. And so I found myself listening to a lot of this like uplifting pop type music that was on the radio. And so again, this was like 2005 to 2010. So we're listening to like Usher and Chris Brown and Kesha and Katy Perry. But I think what really changed is as I've gotten older, I started to recognize a lot of the significance of hip hop and a lot of the ways that they tell their stories and a lot of the aspects of lyricism involved in hip hop, or at least old school hip hop, that's very different than, say, rap is now today.
That's really cool. I think so. Personally, for me, I like my music preferences have changed so much over the years because I grew up with Latin parents who liked Spanish music, and I used to not like music because of that fact. Because all I would listen to is their music. But as I grew up, as I became older, I would go on the school buses. I would listen to radio music, and then once I hit the age of about 14, I got some more autonomy about the music I liked. I met friends who liked different types of music, who they introduced me to, and I would branch out. So that's like around the age around my freshman year of high school. My eighth grade is when I would get into Tyler the Creator or like those different type of outlandish things, and that's kind of where I grew up my music taste outside of what I had as my base, because up until that point, it was really just radio hits and the Spanish music because that's all I knew. But once I got that taste for music, like American music, and once I got acclimated to all those types of rhythms, I really started to enjoy it, and I just got swept up into it. And really, it was for me personally, it was like R&B and rap. Like Kanye was a big factor for me. Where like when I was in that school bus and I would listen, it was like 2007, and I was riding to school. That's what I would hear in the school bus, and that was a really big impact on me growing up, and it kind of led to me falling into like other types of raps like Madlib and MF Doom. But it was a big rabbit hole for me. But how did you have any types of rabbit holes you fell into? Like, did you have any genres or types of artists that you kind of fell in love with and that was your thing for you, and you had this phase or any types? I know a lot of people have like an emo phase or a rock phase. What did you have a phase? What was that for you?
Well, I think everybody, at least back at that point in time, had a Kanye phase.
Yeah, a
And
lot of
so
people had a
so
Kanye
so
phase.
for me, my Kanye phase was what was it? It was Monster and God, some other song that I used to throw on when I was throwing shit in the freezer. Sorry, pardon my language. Throwing stuff in the freezer at a Safeway at 5 a.m, stocking the dairy department, and I would have my headphones in, listening to some Kanye to keep me awake. But I think the more interesting thing, and I'd like to actually turn this into a question for you, Jose, is having somebody like Kanye as an influence, and then seeing the progression of somebody like Kanye as an artist over time, like say 2007 to now. His like, what are your opinions of Kanye as an artist? Like, he has a new song out. I haven't heard it yet, but
Yeah, it's called Na Na Na.
yeah, nah, nah, nah. Yeah, exactly. I was just
Okay.
reading about that today.
Okay, so there's a really big thing about how people don't change past the age of 9 or 10 years old.
Which I
Once,
think is stupid
I mean,
to an extent.
it's like most psychologists say that after the age of about 12, your personality is about set for the rest of your life. Well, and if anyone has any more information on that, please correct us. I'm really might just be spitting stuff out of my behind. I really don't know.
I'd also like to
But-
point out, Jose, psychology is one of those degrees that is
Whoa.
questionable at best.
Whoa.
No. Don't get me wrong.
Whoa.
I'm not saying that they don't work and that they don't study, but I'm just saying that as a degree, it is pretty incomplete at understanding the human experience.
I don't know, man. But I'm not gonna throw out my opinions about the psychology and work. Man, you might have just trashed our 15 minutes of work. But either way, I'm just gonna say that. What were we? You totally.
We're talking
threw
about Kanye.
Kanye, right? So okay, as a Kanye fan, long time Kanye fan. I mean, College Dropout was my favorite album for the longest time. I mean, I had all the bonus tracks and whatnot. I think I do believe that after a certain age, we do hold a personality for about the rest of our lives, to be honest. Like I've seen it so many times I can't not believe it to be true. But there are tweaks that can be made through our lifetimes. Like, of course, we are not the same person at the age of 15 that we are of 20, that we are of 35, that we are of 65. Of course not, right? We learn and we live and we continue to accumulate that knowledge throughout our lifetime, of course. But the point is that actually, I don't know what the point is. What were we talking about?
Kanye.
Kanye, right. So I at a certain point, I believe that Kanye changed as a person, and those tweaks led me off of him, right? So I do believe that money amplifies your personality. So if you were a evil person in the beginning and then you got money, you're even a bigger evil person after.
But does that mean that you think that Kanye was an evil person to begin with?
No, I mean, I'm not calling Kanye an evil person at all. I'm just saying it amplifies your personality. Now, if Kanye had an ego problem beforehand, money increased his ego problem after the fact, right? But I don't know Kanye personally, so I'm not going to talk on his name. I'm just saying his arc of his career and the music that he has put out has shifted towards a different focus. And I do not personally know him, and I cannot speak on his mental or his family or whatever his situation might be. But I do believe in story arcs. I do believe in character development. I do believe in progress, and I do believe in learning most of all. So
Okay.
that's what I think about that. But for you, Niko, I have a question for you. When was the moment where you kind of learned that independence? When you kind of realized you had a moment of self-awareness, when you were like you could make your own decisions and you could live your life? What was that for you?
Gosh, it feels like never.
Well,
Being alive in 2020 is kind of a different experience because it feels like a lot of stuff is outside of your control. But I feel like in terms of uh, music has always just sort of been an escape. So it allows me to create the soundtrack for my life. And so there are so many different artists who have expressed themselves in so many immaculate ways that you can oftentimes find somebody who's going through an experience that you can relate to. And it's the music that sort of helps guide you and keep you on track through the difficult or the trying or whatever it is kind of times. And that's the thing that I think makes music so wonderful, is because it allows you to express the human essence through sound and in a way that gets other people to relate to it and create this sort of community through your words and rhythm.
I love that. I love how passionate you are about music. It's actually really inspiring. I, when I was young, I thought I was passionate. I mean, I downloaded Fruit Loops on my laptop when I was 16, and I got into beats, and I thought I loved music, and I bought a Williams keyboard, and then I saved up for a beat pad,
It's the
and
machine,
the
dude. He got the machine.
64. Yeah, I did. But I mean, it was a commitment, and I still love it. I do. But I mean, I have so many different types of loves that it's hard to focus on one unless I have a motivation to. And my biggest motivation for most things is like friends. So like, I love that. I mean, I've always had David to like make music with, and I used to have Sean, but now I have you, Niko.
Sean.
Yeah, it's a weird, yeah. But either way, anyways, uh, this has been episode whatever it has been.
4 or 5.
Either way, thank you guys for coming back to Cast with Friends. This is me, Jose Alvarado. I am age 23.
I'm age 28. My name's Niko Pal.
And I am super glad you guys are back for another episode. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. I appreciate it. Thanks.